Hi, I'm Ron Spurnberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education.
In this week's episode, we chat with Kris Murray, founder and president of Childcare Marketing Solutions, about how you need to make time for passion-filled activities that energize you as an owner or director of a preschool or childcare organization. She gets to the deep question of what drives you to do what you do to get back in tune with your life purpose to energize yourself and your staff. This means being purposeful about making the time to do these important activities, both for yourself and for your business, and holding yourself accountable for it. Kris has some super insightful advice that gets to the reflective questions of what drives us to work in early childhood education. This is a must-listen episode if you're a leader in early childhood education, so stay tuned for this episode of the Preschool Podcast. To kick things off, let's start with why you got into the field of childcare in the first place.
Well, Ron, that's a pretty interesting story, and it's fun, and I love talking about it. So I was just a mom, to be quite honest, whose kids were in preschool, and I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And being a marketer for my whole life, as well as a mom, was able to see from an outsider's perspective looking in that all the different childcare settings that my kids were in, which was quite a variety of settings. At that point, I'd been in a Montessori school, a home daycare, a chain, and an independent mom-and-pop daycare or preschool. And all of them had one thing in common, which was that they were clearly not skilled in marketing and business and just the layers of professionalism, the way that they would follow up with their clients or prospects, the way that they were just trained on how to do a tour. I just noticed from a mom's perspective and just with my marketing hat on the side that, geez, these people really, I think, could use my help. And so I really just kind of put together some services and some training on how to improve what they were doing. And I saw a stat that only 10 or 15% of early childhood professionals, directors and leaders and owners, had any formal business or marketing training. Somebody had done a study. And so that proved to be a really good thing, that I was able to bring a market that really needed it. They were actually starving for it. So I started doing webinars and different trainings and live trainings and speaking at seminars around the country, conferences. And people just loved it. They just, they needed it so badly in our industry. So that's how I got into it, was just giving the market something that it needed.
Got you. And do you think that the point that you made about 10 to 15% of childcare directors, owners, and early childhood educators having business or marketing training is the primary reason why they were struggling with marketing and business, or do you think there's other reasons for that as well?
I think that's a big reason, but and part of that is because it's a symptom of the fact that a lot of owners have come up the ranks and been a kindergarten teacher turned into a preschool owner, for example. Many, many, many stories. We call them origin stories of why did I start this center or this school? How did I get inspired to own a preschool or a child care center? Well, it's because I was a teacher or I was a mom and I realized that the kind of program that I wanted my child to be in didn't exist, so I started it myself. And a lot of them did come from the field of education. They were kindergarten teachers. They were preschool teachers. And so because of that career path, naturally, you wouldn't normally get any training in marketing and business. And then the other thing, I think, is that people come to the business going, like many, many different kinds of businesses, whether it's a plumbing business or dry cleaner or what have you, I'm in the business of teaching and caring for children, and I'm going to do what I do so well that word of mouth is going to spread like wildfire around my community, and I don't need to market. And many times in the early 90s and then throughout all the way up until 2007, that was fine for many childcare owners. They didn't have to market because they did have that word of mouth. But then when the Great Recession hit, and leading up to that point, and the competitiveness of early childhood, it got more and more competitive, and franchises entered the market. They realized that they better get savvy with figuring out how to make this thing profitable and get clients in the door, or guess what? I'm going to have to close my doors. So I just think, I think when you start a business and you hang out your shingle, especially if you started out as a preschool teacher, you think, I'm going to do it, they will come, and I don't necessarily need to get marketing and business training. But then later you might realize that that's a fallacy.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So it sounds like it's safe to assume that a lot of these teachers who transitioned into maybe a supervisory role and then a director role probably focus a lot of their attention on the programming and on the education, which is amazing. But that word of mouth about the great quality of their programs internally might not have really made it out to the families in the community around the childcare programs.
Yeah, exactly. They put 90% of their focus on the curriculum and the quality, which is fantastic. That's what you want. But if nobody knows that you're doing such an amazing job because you're not being found on Google and your signage is terrible, so no one can find you or no one even knows you exist, then you're going to sadly not be able to gain and keep those clients that you need to survive. So you can have every amazing curriculum and piece of quality in place, but sadly still not be able to run a successful business if you don't have the other pieces in place.
Yeah. And that was actually one of the pieces that I wanted to talk to you about was, how do childcare owners and directors spend their time? And so we've touched on the fact that, maybe a lot of these directors and owners who spent their time in the classroom previously maybe spend a little bit too much time in the programs themselves. And so I guess a couple questions about that. Firstly, how would you recommend that a director or owner spends their time in terms of time in program, in classroom versus on marketing the business or other activities?
Mm-hmm. So I think it varies to say that one director prescription of time fits all. It would be a misnomer because what we try to teach people is to strengthen your strengths and to work in the area of your unique brilliance. We help people figure out what that is. So what are the things that when you come to work are the passion-filled activities in your day that you look forward to doing, that you could do all day long, that energize you and don't drain you. So if everybody can be mostly working in their area of unique brilliance, they're going to be much more effective and passionate and inspiring to others and effective in their job in general. So trying to figure out what that is for each person so that everybody on your team can be fulfilled and passionate about their job is great. And that's one thing. And so if you as a director just love being in the classroom, doing teacher assessments and child assessments and coaching teachers and helping them, developing them, and that drives you, then that should be, and that's a fantastic, use of your time for sure, because it supports teacher happiness, and parents are going to see that their kids are happier because the classroom effectiveness is just going to be, at the top of it's going to be 110%. It's going to be hitting all cylinders. So that's one thing to take into account is that, so if that was the case, just on that example, I would say that director should be spending probably at least a third of her time doing those things that in the classroom and for the quality, the teacher support, teacher happiness, and the impacts are going to show in the child. So when the child gets to kindergarten, the impacts are going to be all throughout, from 0 to 5. It's the entire community is going to be feeling the impacts of that director working at her unique brilliance and making a difference in the classroom. So, but that's balanced with all the other stuff that directors have to do. And I think, Ron, it's one of the hardest jobs on the planet. I tell people all the time, because they also have to do potentially billing or account reconciliation and licensing stuff and food program stuff and paperwork and dealing with phone calls all day long where parents are calling in and maybe upset parents, and there's just so much, and there can be also a lot of interruptions. But what we like to try to do is we like to try to help people sift through all that noise and have a few hours of uninterrupted time every day. This is from the director's standpoint, so that she can focus on what we call her high payoff activities. And those would be certainly giving tours, following up on phone calls, making sure that her enrollment building activities and her enrollment building processes are getting some good focus every day, ideally, so that the enrollment in the school and the retention in the school, the family retention and the happiness level, which is again supported by the classroom we mentioned earlier, can be at its optimum. And so if you can stay between 90 to 100% full and you can be focused on enrollment to some degree, maybe 20% of your week, maybe 10% of your week, but it needs to have some focus for sure. Otherwise, the enrollment of the school will suffer. So that needs to be a focus. Certainly classroom needs to be a focus. I like to always also say a part of your day should be getting up and walking around and greeting parents, saying bye to parents, just making those human connections. I think directors who are active and who get up, who make sure that the trash is picked up outside, of the school, the little wrappers of, just paying attention to detail, and managing by walking around, talking to your teachers, making sure they have everything they need. And that's a good school. That's the sign of a healthy, well-run school. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Some very good points in there. Now, one thing I'm sure some directors and owners would ask you is, Kris, I would love to have this uninterrupted time to do these payoff activities, but how the heck do I find that time in my day? Like you said, this is one of the hardest jobs on the planet, and there's so many things going on. There's interruptions, there's paperwork, there's reporting, there's teachers, there's families, there's kids. It's chaos. I've got so many things going on. How do I find that time to do that stuff?
So we like to train directors on how to set a daily schedule, and they actually communicate it. I've seen people use something as simple as a small whiteboard, and they would, ideally have something that they could hang on their door or paste outside of their door or put up that you can see through the window right there, so that you have an expectation of what the director's daily schedule is. And it says, and then also part of that is grouping teacher interruptions. So she would maybe have 4 15-minute slots every day from 1 to 2 p.m. So let's take you through it really quick. So an example schedule could be, director daily schedule could be greeting parents and doing classroom management and observations, making sure everybody is all good and they have all the stuff they need from 8:30 to 9:30. And then from 9:30 to 11 is a quiet, uninterrupted time, and she's got a front desk person or an assistant director who's handling the phone at that time. That's essential. And I like to see the phone answered by a human being, by the way. I don't want that phone to go to voicemail. So if it has to go to voicemail, then we need to figure out something else. Because parents and then prospective parents, they want to have the phone answered by a human being at a child care center. It's very disconcerting when you're calling a school to learn about ABC child care and then it's constantly going to voicemail. It's making you think, well, I'm not going to put my child in that school because I can't get hold of them, by the way. But anyway, so the phone, assuming, is being answered by a front desk gal or assistant director or somebody. or the cook while the cook is prepping lunch or whatever. And then director can get stuff done from 9:30 to 11 uninterrupted. May have an occasional parent call, but hopefully all that stuff's being taken and handled by the front desk person, ideally. And then from 11 to 12, maybe the director takes an early lunch or does something else. And then, like I mentioned, from 12 to 1 are her teacher slots. So everybody's on nap now. Teachers can come in for 10 or 15. They've grouped their concerns. So if a teacher wants to come in and talk to the director, she gets coverage, or they're on nap, so she doesn't need coverage. She comes in and has her 15-minute one-on-one with the director. And then there's another potential slot from 2 to 4 of quiet time where the director can get work done. And then from 4 to 6, she's open and available. She's out. She's mingling. She's talking to parents. She's working with kids. She's what have you. So that's just an example. But I think if you post it, you can also use a system we've developed, which is just red light, green light, yellow light. And if you're on green light, that means I'm open for interruptions, come on in. If I'm on red light, it means I'm really trying to get this licensing thing done ASAP. Please don't interrupt me. Please go see the assistant director, or go let somebody know, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So there's got to be ways that she can protect her time. If not, folks are never going to get to their high payoff activities if they can't protect their time. And so that's what we teach.
As you were talking, I was taking some notes for myself.
Good.
I could definitely use some of that uninterrupted time. I like the red, yellow, green light thing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I'm glad I can help you, Ron. Fantastic.
So just changing direction a little bit here. So these things all make a lot of sense to me. Seem like very logical things to do. Why do directors, owners of childcare programs ultimately decide to work with you? Is there sort of like a breaking point where they say, enough is enough, or is it oftentimes that they're struggling with enrollment, or they're really stressed? When do they commonly come to you and say, Kris, we really need you to help us out here?
Well, we, a little bit of self-promotion. We do put on the industry's largest business-oriented event. So the Child Care Success Summit is every October, and we're thinking about adding a spring event. But right now we just have the one. And people come year after year to get re-inspired and re-motivated, because being an early childhood owner or a director can be an extremely draining, like I said, difficult job that feels like sometimes a very thankless job. And so they usually join our coaching programs or work with us because we have a whole peer support group. So not only do they get us as coaches, but they get each other. And so sometimes being an owner or director in this field can feel like the loneliest place on the planet. And so not only do they get the tools, the shortcuts, the resources, and the accountability and the coaching so that we give them help to get to that next level of success, but they also recognize that there's this yummy group of people who are going through exactly what they're going through. And they usually meet those folks at a Success Summit in October, and then we'll have 600 people coming this year, and then a bunch of vendors, which is great. And then they all kind of network, and then they realize, well, this is a pretty cool tribe. Like, these are really people they're all early childhood people. They all know, they all share their trials and tribulations and pains and successes and wins. And so to have that group of peers, and then with us as the coaches, helping support them to get to the next level, and we hold them accountable. I mean, I think you recognize that you're ready to join us when you're like, you know what? I'm tired of going it alone. I've been beating my head against the wall. I can see that Kris has a lot of shortcuts, and then these other members can help me stay sane, get to that next level of success, be more profitable, free up my time, find a little bit of time freedom in my life. We had one guy who, after working with us, finally got to take his wife on vacation to Italy for 2 weeks. It was the first vacation they'd had in 16 years.
Awesome.
So, and he told that story on stage. And so people get inspired. They all just inspire each other, and I'm just kind of the facilitator. I'm the conduit for it, but it's fantastic. And so I think they recognize themselves in the folks that are there, and then they just get called to join us, which is great.
And so for those folks who might not know about your conference or don't show up to your conference and talk to that peer group, which sounds very valuable, how would they typically find out about you? Is it through word of mouth?
Yeah, we have a lot of great referrals and word of mouth in the industry, and at this point we're pretty well known. The Success Summit's pretty well known, and there's a lot of industry buzz about it, and so there's also a lot of social media buzz. So they'll, it's really usually word of mouth, or they'll see one of our books for sale a lot of times too, Ron, because we just did Jessica, who works for me, just did a brand new book on staff, hiring, how to how to hire the best staff, how to motivate them, how to keep them with you, how to get them trained. And so we now have 3 books in our company, and so a lot of people will just start by buying one of our books, and then they'll come to an event, and then they'll go from there.
Got ya. Hiring staff, super important for sure. One thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned before was holding people accountable. I'm sure one thing that I think I would struggle with if I was a director is I would get really excited about all of the things I could do to improve my childcare business or my organization, but it would be really difficult to execute over time, and maybe I would start to slack off a little bit after a few weeks, and then after a couple months I'm kind of back where I started. Is there certain things that you recommend to do to keep on top of these recommendations that you provide?
So the way that we have 2 kind of structures inside of our coaching programs to keep people accountable. Well, actually 3. So we have live meetings with all the members, and we get them to say, these are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish in the next 90 days. They're going to move my business forward. Then when they come back to the next meeting after 90 days, it's, did you hit those things? We don't specifically get them to stand up and say whether they hit them or not, but we generally hold them accountable, and their peers hold them accountable. So the second thing we have is kind of a peer-to-peer accountability, where they get a buddy, and they buddy up with a peer in our program, and they call each other every week and keep each other accountable in between meetings, which is fantastic.
That is a great idea.
And then the final thing, it's great. And then the final thing is me and my other co-coach, Jessica. They get on the phone with myself and with her, and we hold them accountable. So I meet with most of my members on a monthly or every other month basis on the phone, just a 30-minute phone call. But we always start with, all right, well, what have you accomplished since the last time? What was the homework from last time was X. Did you get it done? How did it go? What pitfalls? What successes? And so we just kind of go from call to call, meeting to meeting, trying to get them to make progress. And they usually do.
One of the things I wanted to touch on a little bit more was you mentioned that you've recently put out a book about hiring staff and managing staff in a child care program. And I was looking at your Facebook page, and a lot of the content on there was about how childcare staff are underpaid. How do you think that correlates to childcare success?
I don't really buy into the whole industry is underpaid thing. I mean, I do agree that it would be fantastic. I mean, there's nobody that would love to pay teachers more than me. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, we are not really motivated with our careers in general as human beings. Most of us are not motivated solely by money. Certainly, most of us don't have money at the top. If you pick to become a preschool teacher as your career, you're the kind of person that's not going to want to necessarily put money at the top of your list anyway. You want to make a difference. You want to work for people who have a vision and have passion and support your growth as a teacher and send you to some trainings and give you all the classroom supplies you need and help you make a fantastic curriculum plan and help you make an impact in the lives of children. And that's, at the end of the day, what it's all about. Yes, would it be great to pay teachers more? Of course. But most child care centers are making, at the bottom line, because everybody thinks, oh, well, they must be making a ton of money, and look at these tuition rates. They must be making hand over fist. Well, that's not true. Most child care centers are making between 10 and 12% profit, which for a retail business, a service business, is on the low end. So it's a labor of love. Tuition is high. Wages are low, but there's a lot of money that goes into running a high-quality child care center. You got to pay for this big facility. You have a lot of overhead. You have a ton of salaries. You have a very, payroll, even though teachers don't make that much, usually runs around 60% of total revenue. So it's a huge cost. When there's new laws going into effect in December related to wage and overtime, those laws are going to impact the viability of child care centers, and some won't make it. So we help people try to, manage costs, make a little money at the bottom line, and do a great job for kids. And yes, we'd all love to pay teachers more, but I really don't think, Ron, that that's the number one human driver of why teachers stay. I think they want to work for a leader who appreciates them, who, drives them, shares their vision, improves the school, puts money back into the school, improves the playground, and does things for the kids, does things for the families. And so I've seen a lot of really high-quality programs where there's no teacher turnover because the teachers just love the culture there. It's a strong culture, and that's really what it's about at the end of the day, more than pay, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In any career or any job, people do it for more than one reason. Altruistic reasons certainly being one of them, and like you said too, culture and having friends and community at work, I think, are also super important for directors and owners to keep in mind. Absolutely.
For sure.
A couple rapid fire questions here for you before we finish up. Do you have certain sources where you get information about childcare and early childhood education, or maybe places where you direct the childcare directors and owners that you work with?
I do. I like to attend conferences when I can, other people's conferences, so I can kind of just keep a beat on trends and what's happening. Of course, NACCE is the big national conference, and at EYC, and that's a great resource, especially for teachers. And your state conferences. Some states are really active in ECE. They have great state associations, and some not so much. But the state level can be fantastic for resources. Of course, Exchange Magazine. I'm perusing that monthly, and the National Association of Child Care Resource and Referral. I think a lot of child care owners, interestingly, still don't know about the fact that there's, I don't know the number, almost 300 child care aware offices, child care resource and referral offices around the United States that are resources just for our industry. So if you don't know where your office is, just go to Child Care Aware and put your zip code in and find your local child care resource and referral office, and they have a ton of resources available for local child care providers, loans, grants, training, etc. So those are all places and resources that I use.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to put you on the spot. If I came to you as a child care director and I said, Kris, I've only got 60 seconds, but what's like the one big thing that you can tell me that is going to help me out?
Ron, the one big thing. I guess I feel like it kind of goes back to that passion and vision thing. I guess I feel like I would maybe say, what's your why? Why are you doing this? What do you want at the end of your day when you're 90 and you're laying on your deathbed and you look back on your life? What is it that you're going to be like, I'm really, really glad I did that? You know, kind of trying to get back in touch with, for lack of a better word, your life purpose, you know, what's your why? What drives you? And how can you reignite your passion so that you're going to show up at work, you're going to reignite your teachers, you're going to make a difference in the life of kids, and that will, I think, help you determine what you want to do to live your best life.
Yeah, well said. That's great. I think everybody can learn from that too. So, well, thanks so much for joining me. I think this was a very interesting conversation. And last but not least, where can people find you online, Kris?
They can find us at childcare-marketing.com. That's our main website. And then if you want more information about our big conference in October, you can go to childcaresuccesssummit.com.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kris.
Thank you so much, Ron. This has been fun. I really appreciate it.
What's your name?
Michaela.
Michaela. How are you?
Hi.
You having fun playing?
Yes.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to play out here?
Playing monsters.
You like to play monsters? Do you like the swings? Okay. What else you like to do?
Play my Dora bike.
Oh, with your Dora bike? Oh, okay. Do you ride fast?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, have fun here. All right.